Greetings everyone, I'm Adam Haritan, and today I'd like to introduce you to a lesser known wild food that you can harvest during the spring season. Now when I say lesser known, I have to provide some clarification. This wild food is lesser known here in eastern North America, and more specifically in the northeastern United States and southeastern Canada, where the species grows. In its native regions in China, Japan, Korea, and in Russia, this plant is much more commonly known and utilized as a wild food. The woody plant I'm referring to is none other than Japanese Angelica tree, and it is one of the coolest plants that you will ever encounter. It's also one of the most formidable plants that you will ever encounter. This species, Aralia elata, is a small tree or a large shrub that contains very sharp prickles, which some people call thorns or spines. And these prickles are found all over the tree. If you grab the tree trunk with your bare hands, these prickles will easily puncture your skin. Now, few plants in this corner of the world resemble Japanese Angelica tree, so you are unlikely to confuse it for too many species, except for devil's walking stick. Devil's walking stick, Aralia spinosa, looks nearly identical to Japanese Angelica tree. It's very prickly, it's a small tree or a large shrub, and the overall morphology closely resembles the morphology of Japanese Angelica tree. Fortunately, the edible uses of Japanese Angelica tree that I'll cover in this video also apply to devil's walking stick. And after I briefly discuss how to use Japanese Angelica tree as a wild food, I'll briefly compare and contrast the physical properties of the two species. So right here is Japanese Angelica tree. Now, devil's walking stick is growing in this general area, but I'm only going to harvest Japanese Angelica tree today because its numbers are so much greater in this particular area. All these woody trunks that are coming up out of the soil in this red pine plantation, this is all Japanese Angelica tree. So I would say that this particular colony is quite aggressive. As I mentioned before, Japanese Angelica tree is not native to North America. It was introduced to this continent as an ornamental in the 1830s, and it soon became naturalized outside of cultivated settings. Japanese Angelica tree spreads through root suckers, and it also spreads with the assistance of birds that consume the colorful fruits and disperse the seeds. Devil's walking stick, Aralia spinosa, is native to the eastern United States, and it is a very common species, particularly in the southeastern United States. But here in this particular ecosystem, its numbers are not that high. So I'm going to leave it alone today, and I will instead focus my attention on Japanese Angelica tree. So the parts that I'm most interested in today are the young shoots and the young leaves. Spring is the season when the young shoots and the young leaves are the most tender. Now, I realize that spring is a fairly long and diverse season, so let me be more specific, that way you can time your harvest perfectly. Right now, in my neck of the woods, western Pennsylvania, service berries just passed their peak stage of flowering. Red elderberry is at its peak stage of flowering. Paper birch is flowering, and the young seed cones of tamarack have appeared and are eagerly awaiting pollen deposition. When all this is happening, Japanese Angelica tree shoots are at a good stage for harvesting. Now, to be honest with you, it probably would have been more ideal for me to harvest these shoots about a week ago. Many shoots have already unfurled and leaves are starting to develop, and it seems that deer have munched on all the shoots that are at their level. But fortunately, plenty of shoots above their level are still good to harvest, so I will focus my attention up there instead. So here's what a good Japanese Angelica tree shoot looks like. As you can see, the leaves haven't unfurled completely yet. They're still held tightly together, and there are no prickles on the stems. This shoot is located maybe 6.5 feet off the ground. Interestingly, the shoots that are reappearing after having been browsed by deer are very prickly. You can see young prickles all over the stems. Now, you can harvest these shoots, but you'll definitely want to remove the prickles with your fingernails or with a knife. Today, though, I'm more interested in harvesting shoots like this one. An easy way to do this is to bend the trunks down and break the shoots right at their base where they become woody. Now I'm wearing gloves not because the shoots are prickly, but because the trunks are loaded with hardened, incredibly sharp, skin-puncturing prickles. So here's what a handful of Japanese Angelica tree shoots look like. Notice that there are no prickles on any of these shoots. If there are, you'll want to remove them, and you may also want to peel some of the stalks if the outer layers seem tough and fibrous. These shoots are still very young and tender, so I don't feel the need to spend too much time peeling their outer layers. So what do we do with the shoots once we harvest them? Well, you can eat them raw, and if you're just looking for a trailside nibble, which is often the case for me, you can eat them as is on the spot. Or you can cook them. And the cooking technique that I will demonstrate is my go-to technique for most wild, young, tender shoots: blanching. Now, sometimes I will saute shoots after blanching, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to blanch them. So make sure your shoots are clean, remove any tough parts, but if you kept the shoots clean in the field and if you only harvested tender parts, you won't need to do any more work in the kitchen. Now, some people might be tempted to remove the base of these shoots because they are firmer than the leaves, but as long as the base isn't woody, I'd recommend leaving it there for two reasons. First, it keeps the shoots connected together so they don't fall apart. And second, the texture is wonderful. It's almost crunchy, but not quite. Add the shoots to boiling water. Cook for a few minutes. I'll cook these for 3 minutes. Remove the shoots from the water with a slotted spoon. Season if you want, and enjoy. And here I decided to add the freshly blanched shoots to a dish of wild harvested rice. Now, of course, there are lots of other ways to prepare Japanese Angelica tree shoots, and a very common way to consume them, particularly in Japan, is to fry them and create a tempura, but blanching is good enough for me. The taste of a Japanese Angelica tree shoot is very pleasant, it's very herbaceous, it has some bitter notes near the end, more so when you're eating it raw compared to after you blanched it. And it has an Apiaceae vibe to it. And Apiaceae is the family of plants that parsley, carrot, celery, and cilantro belong to. As it turns out, the family that Japanese Angelica tree belongs to, Araliaceae, is taxonomically placed within the same order that Apiaceae belongs to, the Apiales order. And the first time I tasted Japanese Angelica tree, I detected a very unique, almost terpene taste that seemed very familiar, and I initially couldn't figure out where I detected that taste before. It eventually dawned on me that the other source of that terpene yet still pleasant taste was from American spikenard fruits. As it turns out, American spikenard, Aralia racemosa, is closely related to Japanese Angelica tree, Aralia elata. Now, as I said earlier, Japanese Angelica tree closely resembles devil's walking stick. The two species, despite opposing names, one's angelic, the other's devilish, look nearly identical. Now, unfortunately, spring probably isn't the best time to differentiate between the two species. You'll probably have more luck during the summer and autumn season when the flowers and fruits are available. The flower and fruiting structures of Japanese Angelica tree kind of sit on top, but still within the canopy of the tree. They don't extend too far beyond the top. The flower and fruiting structures of devil's walking stick often protrude well beyond the top of the canopy, and they often droop due to the weight of all the fruits clustered together. Fortunately, devil's walking stick shoots are edible, and you could treat them exactly the same way you would treat Japanese Angelica tree shoots. So that's all I got for you today. Hope you enjoyed the video, hope you learned something. I encourage you to go out and see if you can find this prickly tree. It's not very tall, it's not very wide, but its shoot may be the tastiest wild food you've never tried. Thank you for watching this video, I truly appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, and if you're not subscribed to the Learn Your Land YouTube channel, I encourage you to subscribe to the Learn Your Land YouTube channel. You can also head on over to learnyourland.com and sign up for the email newsletter. And if you're on social media, feel free to give Learn Your Land a follow on Instagram and on Facebook. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you on the next video.